my name is Ana Garcia, and today I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction to the programming language Elm. And we had a really cool talk on reactive programming from Nicole, so this is actually an example of a reactive functional programming language. Elm is a pretty new language. It was developed in 2012 by Evan Czaplicki as an extension of his Harvard thesis. And it's a really great tool for the front-end developer. Something really cool that stands out is that it compiles to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, all three. And it was designed to solve two problems: JavaScript's maintainability problem, and it's hard to find runtime errors. So this graph is going to give you kind of an example of what I'm talking about. It's taken from a talk that Evan gave in 2015 at Curion, and he discussed the difference between JavaScript's usability features and functional programming languages like Haskell's scalable and maintainable features. And he argued that JavaScript is really great. It's an easy easy language to learn and to get a hello world program up, but for functional programming languages, it might not be so easy. And so Elm is actually, its compiler is written in Haskell. And if you've seen any Haskell before, you might notice that the syntax of Elm looks kind of similar. And we'll get into examples in a minute. And this graph demonstrates how fast Elm runs. This is just a demonstration of a simple to-do app. And you'll notice that Elm uses a virtual DOM, and it heavily uses immutable data structures just like React, but it's significantly faster. And I think this speaks to its functional programming language, or from its family of functional programming languages. Elm is also a type-inferred language, and as JavaScript developers, we kind of understand what this means. If we were to make a multiply function, right, we just would write it like the first example above. We would have A and B and just multiply A and B. An example of a non-type inferred language would be Java, where not only do we have to tell the program A and B are numbers, we have to say that they're integers or floats or what specifically we want. So here's what Elm looks like. It's actually just the second line. That's the multiply function. But this, which we're going to get into in a moment, is not only multiplying the number, it's throwing it up on the page in HTML right away. And you can see you don't have to tell the program A and B are numbers, but it is standard convention to write a comment. So there's two lines are comments, and that says multiply is a function, and it takes two numbers and returns a number. So I'll show you some quick examples. So this is the multiply function, and right now we're in Elm REPL, and this is on your right side is the HTML. So we're seeing 15. So the reason I talked about type-inferred language is that Elm has something really cool for developers in debugging. So if I were to accidentally multiply A with B, in JavaScript, we wouldn't get such a helpful error, right? We might get not a number, or type error, or something not very specific. But in Elm, it says, hey, the first argument was expected to be a number, but it's a character. And it even highlights it in red, so you see what's happening. Also, if I, as I often do when I'm coding, misspell words, and if I were to do that, Elm tells me right away, hey, maybe you want multiply instead. So it has really cool features for programmers. Another cool feature is something called a time travel debugger and a hot swapping feature. So this is a cool game of Mario. And here, let me refresh it. Oop. Why is it not running? Okay, here we go. So I can just play Mario, and I can see what's happening here. But I can actually pause. I can scroll back in time and see what did my code do? And I can follow along right here. Also, I can also change my code. So maybe I decide I want Mario to jump higher, and I can see how would that affect my code before and after. And I can visually see it with these lines, but I can also scroll through and see it. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, so those are some neat things about its debugging feature. Elm also has a structure and architecture that we might be familiar with. It's a model view update. And if you're familiar with Redux at all, it kind of steals a lot of ideas from Elm to help React in its architecture and to be less complex. And so basically, up at the top, we're importing HTML. We're using divs, we're using buttons, we're using text. You can write it this way. You can, instead of using div, you can do HTML. That's the same thing, but it's quicker. Here we're instantiating our program. In the view, this is what you're seeing on the screen. We have a div with a button, which has an on-click event, which we're exposing at the top, with a text of a dash. We have another div that's two-stringing the model, which is right now 0. We have another div with a button, which also is using or listening for an on-click event to increment. And then here in the update is where you change the model. So, oh, and another kind of interesting thing about Elm is that we have these commas on this side. You don't have to put the commas there. It's just convention, and Elm developers like to do that so you don't forget commas. But I'm going to show you a quick example of if we were to make, say, a reset button instead. So I'm just going to, on click, I'm going to create a reset feature, add a text, of reset. And then I'm going to add reset down here. So I'm listening for it. See the spelling. This is why I need Elm. All right, and then I'm going to just set the model to 0 always. So we can compile. Now I have a reset button, so I can increment, I can decrement, and I can reset. And I don't have CSS here, but if I were, I could import an attribute. So say, let's expose a class. And you can, if you don't want to use Elm, you can also just use your CSS. But here, if I say, maybe these buttons have a class of buttons. You won't see anything, but oh, let's try misspell the module name. Okay, this is why we do this. Okay, attributes is what I forgot. Oh no. 2 T's. See, this is, yeah. There you go. So no class change, but Elm to the rescue. Okay, so that's all I have for today. I left a lot of cool stuff for you guys to look at. On the tutorials, you can find more of like graphics and 2D and 3D type of programming things. The docs are great to look at. They have more examples. There's a discussion board. There's even a Slack channel. There's the Kurion video that I referenced. You can learn more about when he's talking about functional programming languages and JavaScript and scalability and usability. There is a 7-minute tutorial, even though the link says 5 minutes, it's 7 minutes. You can check out the REPL that I was typing in. There's the Mario debugger. There's more information on Elm's architecture, and then the button example that I showed you. That's all I have. Thanks.